I'm Shirlaine from TSC Tuition, and today I'll be talking about Macbeth. Macbeth is one of those texts that are super popular across Victorian high schools. Almost every student will study Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. Sometimes they do both in consecutive years. But Macbeth is one of those texts that I think everybody has to study at some point. Usually it's somewhere around year 10, year 11 sort of level. I love talking about Macbeth. It's one of my favourite plays by Shakespeare. So it is a real pleasure that I get to talk about this almost every year with my students. So I thought that I should film what I usually talk about when we first talk about Macbeth with my students. We're really looking at how the play is set up right from the beginning of the play. So in Act 1, Scene 1, we have the entry of the three witches who are really key figures in the play, even though we don't see a lot of them. And they're basically coming together and setting up the atmosphere for the rest of the play. So it's worth noting that we get some stage directions here, that there's thunder, there's lightning, and the first witch goes, "When shall we three meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain?" Now, when you really think about it, thunder, lightning, and rain they kind of happen together. Like, you can't really have, for example, thunder without lightning. Usually when there's thunder and lightning, there's usually rain. So it's already setting up this feeling in that the words themselves are not to be taken literally, and that is certainly the case as we go through the play. The second witch replies, "When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won." Now, we know that battles have to be lost and won. Someone has to lose, someone has to win. Not always, but most of the time we get a winner and a loser. But the way that it's put together, it's very oxymoronic, that we get two sides essentially of the same coin being sort of talked about together. So again, the second witch here is intensifying this atmosphere of suspense, of tension. And then the third witch jumps in. That will be ere the set of sun, where the play is upon the heath, there to meet with Macbeth. So the rest of that is really sort of just a bit of padding to introduce, one, the character of Macbeth, and also two, just a bit of plot device, I suppose, to let you know that they will soon meet with Macbeth. Now, what's really significant are those last two lines when they all say together, "Fair is foul and foul is fair." We know that fair and foul don't necessarily go together. In fact, they would be complete opposites, right? Fair is nice and beautiful, sometimes pale. Foul is disgusting, it's gross, it's, everything that you don't really want to touch. And the repetition of this equation of both fair and foul as the same thing, and then they switch it up, right? Foul is fair, they say this twice. It really magnifies that sense that nothing is really as it seems. It creates this sort of atmosphere of, "Oh, I don't know what's going to happen. This is all very mysterious. I can't necessarily trust everything that I'm really looking at here." And certainly this is echoed in scene 3 of the same act, when Macbeth comes on stage and his first line is, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen." So immediately he comes on stage and echoes this line that the witches have so, memorably uttered in scene 1. So we know that there is some kind of supernatural connection between him and the witches here. So there's a bit of wordplay around here, and they see the witches give their prophecies. And then what's really significant is when Ross and Ross and Angus come on stage and tell Macbeth the great news that he's been promoted to Thane of Cawdor. That's when it gets Macbeth's wheels turning upstairs, and he starts thinking, one of the predictions or the prophecies have come true. I wasn't Thane of Cawdor, and now the witches have told me that I will be. and now I am. So now he's thinking, well, they also told me I'm going to be king. So is that going to happen? And what's really revealing is when Macbeth and Banquo start talking about this between themselves, because remember, both men heard the prophecies. And so here Macbeth is, immediately thinking, I was Glamis, now I'm Thane of Cawdor as well. The greatest is behind. I'm going to be king. It seems logical that I'm going to be king. And he does this sneaky sort of turnaround, trying to sort of get a feel of what Banquo is thinking when he turns to Banquo and he asks him, "Do you not hope your children shall be kings, when those that gave the Thane of Cawdor to me promised no less to them?" So he's going about it by saying, well, I'm now Thane of Cawdor. They told you your kids are going to be kings. What do you think? So he's trying to test the waters, right? Trying to see if Banquo is, really into this, as Macbeth clearly is, or if he's going to be super sensible about it and say, no, this is ridiculous. Nobody's going to be king other than Duncan. And very clearly, Banquo shows all of his cards. To win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths. Win us with honest trifles, to betray us in deepest consequence. So immediately Banquo reveals that, no, we can't trust these witches. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they've come from. They could be evil. And he very sensibly tells Macbeth that the forces of evil mixes truths with not truths, that the forces of evil will win your trust, right? Win your trust with honest trifles. Trifles are things that don't really matter, like little things, right? And that the forces of evil will win your trust with, by telling you truths that don't really matter in the long run. In this case, Thane of Cawdor doesn't really matter in the long run. In order to betray you when you most cannot be betrayed, to make you fall really hard. And Banquo goes away, sort of, exits the stage a little bit, and Macbeth sort of just ignores all of this advice, really sensible advice that Banquo's given him. And he says, "Two truths are told as happy prologues to the swelling act of the imperial theme." So he's still thinking about being king. And he says, "This supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good." So he's not going so far immediately to trust the witches. He's not going so far as to say that the witches are immediately bad like Banquo is. He's simply saying, well, I don't know. They could be good, they could be bad. I don't have enough evidence for both, right? So he's saying, if ill, why hath it given me earnest of success, commencing in a truth? So he's saying here that, well, if they're bad for me, trying to, get me into trouble, then why has it given me some really good things? He's essentially being promoted to Thane of Cawdor, right? And then he says, "I am Thane of Cawdor if good. Why do I yield to that suggestion whose horrid image doth unfix my hair, makes my seated heart knock in my ribs against the use of nature, present fears are less than horrible imaginings, blah, blah, blah." So he's here saying, well, they can't be too good either, because I am immediately imagining things that, make me a bit scared, make me a bit concerned, right? Unfix my hair, makes the hair stand up on the back of his neck, my seated heart knock at my ribs, my heart's racing, present fears are less than horrible imagining. So he's imagining horrible things, whose murder yet is but fantastical. So he's already thinking that he has to kill Duncan. So he's not sitting there thinking maybe Duncan will have a heart attack. He's thinking, I will have to knife the guy, essentially. So here it's really setting up in these two, first scene and third scene, and that this is about a man who is caught, right, in these logical fallacies, that he's immediately caught by this ambition. Now, whether or not this ambition comes from the witches or not, that's totally up to you. That's up to the students' interpretation, and it's really fascinating what students come up with. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about Macbeth, or at least, a little bit. There are heaps of resources out there on the internet already, so I won't be making another video about this. Now, as always, like and subscribe to all of our social media channels to get our latest tips and tricks to achieving your best in your English subject. And if you'd like to get some one-to-one tutoring, contact us and we can send someone to you. Thanks for watching.